I am thrilled to kick off Season 2 of Inspired, a PLTW podcast. My name is Katie Minihan, and I serve as the Executive Vice President and Chief Impact Officer at Project Lead the Way. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting an episode focused on our Community Impact Awards, and I'm lucky enough to have not just one, but two past winners. Before we dig into the Community Impact Award and what it's all about, I want to introduce the amazing guests that we have with us today. So first, we have Danielle Weber. Danielle is a STEM educator with 20 years of experience teaching and supporting science programs in Stamford, Connecticut. She currently teaches at the Academy of Information Technology and Engineering and also works with educators through Project Lead the Way, Mass Learning Project, and Connecticut's Alternative Route to Certification program. Her professional roles have focused on curriculum development, instructional support, and helping teachers build effective learning experiences for students. Her work has been recognized by organizations including the Connecticut Science Teachers Association, PLTW, and the Pettit Family Foundation. We also have joining us 𝐿𝐼𝐬𝐿, who I'm thrilled is here as well, and he's a technology educator and has been teaching technology education since 1995 and has been a Project Lead the Way instructor since 2002. He has served as a Project Lead the Way master teacher for IED and CEA since 2008 and has taught at Woodstock High School in Woodstock, Illinois since 2011. Beyond his Project Lead the Way experiences, his experience includes leadership roles as an assistant superintendent of schools and assistant principal. Outside of the classroom, Jason and his wife flip homes, and when time allows, he serves as a behind-the-wheel instructor for summer driver's education. So we have amazing guests that are going to share a lot with you today. So thank you both for being here. And before we dig into your community impact journey, I want to share a little bit with our audience about what the awards are all about. So each year, PLTW proudly celebrates students who go beyond the classroom to make a meaningful difference in their communities. The PLTW Community Impact Award honors student teams who apply their knowledge, skills, creativity, and compassion to solve real-world challenges. Community Impact Awards celebrate how Project Lead the Way students dissolve the walls and apply their learning for a greater good. This type of compassionate problem solving is at the heart of what we hope students take away from their Project Lead the Way experience. So we know what the awards are about, but as many of us know too well, knowing the destination is one thing and starting the journey is quite another. So Danielle, as one of the teachers who helped this year's winning high school team, can you share a bit about the winning project and try to think back to what inspired your students to begin this journey?
And so to start, they actually wanted to do a jewelry detangler, which we kind of guided them a little bit to have something that they wanted to work on the entire year and not just something that they thought of in the first place. For all of our class, we started with them thinking of problems that they have, not necessarily solutions. We really want to focus on what is a problem that bothers you. And then we also did kind of like a speed dating where they got to share their ideas with others in the class before they kind of settled in on their project. So after we asked them if they really wanted to work on designing a jewelry detangler for an entire year as seniors, they kind of reworked their brain. One of our students in the group is a type 1 diabetic. So she has plenty of experience with injections, and fear of needles is common among those who have to inject insulin as well as other medications. So ultimately, they wanted to design something to reduce anxiety and pain and be really user and child friendly.
Amazing. And what they came up with, I think, does that for those who have to have a shot. The Pinch Pals idea was fantastic. Well, I love how it transitioned and the idea of thinking not just about a solution, but what's a problem that we really feel passionate about solving. I think that's fantastic as you think about how you help students. Jason, what about you? Your students won in 2024 for their walkability study in Woodstock, Illinois. Tell us a little bit about the project and the initial inspiration for your students.
Sure. So initially it's a capstone course and the students were coming up with different ideas on what to work on. But coincidentally, I overheard them talk about wanting to get together for the week over the weekend and how it was a little difficult trying to coordinate drivers and rides and also getting down to the downtown square, which is where they wanted to go see a movie. And so I just kind of listened And when they came up with ideas, we tossed them around. And at the end, they just kind of were looking at each other saying, I really don't know what I want to do. And I said, you guys, I heard you talk and mention this as an issue. And I said, what if we look a little bit more into that? I said, what's the big issue? And they said, well, Woodstock is spread out in such a large area. It's a very sprawling district. So we have some kids that live out on farms. We have some that live in subdivisions. And then we have a lot of areas. We have the great historic square, but the only people that can really access it are the ones that lives right in the near vicinity. There's not a lot of sidewalks or safe crosswalks that can get to it, as well as there's a business district that cuts through town. So if they want to go to that, that's great. They can go to it, but they can't cross the highway. So they can only access businesses on their side of the highway because there's no crosswalks to get or other ways to get to the other side. So they really just said, it's hard to get around. And, so that's kind of how that whole idea came to about.
That's fantastic. I love, for both of these, the role of you as an educator and just kind of listening and hearing what students are saying and then helping just kind of nudge them, because students have great ideas, and it's just thinking about how do they take those and what gives them a little bit of kind of direction on what they can do with it. A big part of the Community Impact Award is engaging the community. And so I wonder, Jason, can you talk a little bit about the experience that you and your students had with the community outreach portion of this? Because they identified a problem for the community they live in and started solutioning. So what steps did you all take to engage the community as you were designing, learning, and thinking about the viability of that project?
Yeah. So once the students said, that's we like that as a project because, it's something that relates to them. It also relates to other people. And I said, well, that's kind of an urban planning thing. So why don't we go to the professionals about that? I'm not an urban planner. So I said, the books and the internet can only tell us so much. So why don't we reach out to the community? Let's go to the Chamber of Commerce and let's see what the Common Council has to say. So I said, all right, everybody, after school, they got a 7:00 meeting, be there, that's your responsibility. So we sat through the whole meeting. And then at the end, the students kind of approached the Common Council and they said, hey, this is what we are. We're part of the capstone course and what we're looking at. And they told them their experiences with that, kind of hard times getting around. And coincidentally, one of the people in the Common Council was the transportation director. And he jumped in. He said, you're not the only one that's brought this to our attention. And I said, oh, the kids really then they kind of lit up and they said, well, I said, this is an opportunity, you guys, as a team. Sorry, guys being just everyone in general. Why don't we tell them what we could do for them on behalf and maybe helping look at this problem and maybe solve it or come up with some ideas. So together we sat down and we said, hey, the students can go through and they can look at these problems. They can come up with some cost analysis. They can figure out what roads and don't have crosswalks or safe sidewalks or even complete sidewalks. Here's a little side note. During my driver's ed lesson, we go through a turnaround on that busy commercial Highway 47, and the sidewalk only goes from the width of the lot to the width of the lot, and then there's no other sidewalks. So I laugh. I go, this is the world's shortest sidewalk. It's like 10 feet to the left, 10 feet to the right, and that's it. So I'm like, it's great. It's great that they have it, but it's a little bit, it's a moot point. So I said, okay. The Common Council, the Common Council agreed, and they said, all right. We said, can we resource somebody at the city here? And they said, sure. And we said, can we at least do one person to Zoom in, maybe every once in a while? And they said, better yet, what are you doing, next week, Thursday? And I said, nothing. Is come on into our class. So they sent more people than we expected. And they sat down with the students and they started brainstorming, and the students talked about what they got so far. And then what we did is we kind of set up some meetings. We said, hey, let's meet again in December and do an informal presentation. And then maybe in May, at the end of the school year, since it's a year long, what if we come to the Common Council meeting and do a final presentation? So that's kind of how it all kind of played together. And the city worked with us throughout the way, meeting us bi-weekly, which was awesome. The kids were able to email every once in a while. And with that, it helped link us to other cities because the students had to do their research. And I think I might be getting ahead of myself, so I'll stop talking now. Sorry,
Hey,
once I
no,
get on a roll, I just keep going.
no, it's fantastic. And Jason, I wonder if you might, just to probe a little bit more around this. I think for some students, when they think about solving a problem, they think about it in kind of this localized way. And I could imagine that the idea of taking this idea to the Common Council could feel a little intimidating, that you're going to adults, elected officials in your community to pitch this idea that you think is great. How did your students feel about that? And how did the council members react to the students?
So the students, they had many questions. They said, like, how many people are going to be there? Is this going to be recorded? Is this live? And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be broadcast. Yes. I don't know I said, I don't know how many people are going to be there. I mean, it could be a topic, it could be a week when they talk, a meeting when they talk about a lot of things that draw community attention, and some that maybe don't. So, I mean, it's a hit and miss, but I said, regardless, we're going to prepare you for it. So, and that's exactly what the capstone course did, help them prepare for it and look at many different ways that questions could be asked and how to respond to those. But also, we did the other nuances of, how to present, how to talk, what you should do. So then the Common Council said, hey, okay. I said, we're going to do this as professional as we can have our students do it. I said, they're going to fill out a technical report. They're going to go through and fill out an engineering presentation. So we did use the Purdue website when creating the actual documents. And I said, we practice. So it went great. In fact, in December, when they did the pre-meeting, we had all of the community, all of the Common Council members, as well as city officials, come to the school. And we presented at the school, kind of get the kids used to meeting everybody and being in person with them, as well as we had the state representative, Mr. Reich, and oh my gosh, I forgot the other another individual. So and state senator. So we had all these people, and then as well we had various people from. We invited from Project Lead the Way. We sent out a mass invite and said, hey, if you can make it. So we had them Zoom in as well. So it was a great opportunity, I guess, to put the kids on a stage where they were going to possibly at a larger group and help them assimilate that way. So
And
I think it was good.
I think it shows them that adults will listen. Adults are willing to hear the ideas that you have. And I think that's really powerful for students.
And
Now,
just
Danielle,
to interject,
yeah.
that was so true. Sorry, I just keep talking. That was so true. I had to have that same discussion with the kids. I said, you have to understand, you've been researching this for almost a year now. You're kind of the in-house professional. So when people and adults are talking to you, they are going to listen. And so you don't just fill in the blanks with words or information you can't justify. But yeah, so at that point, their eyes just kind of said, "Oh, wow, this is so real."
Yeah, what an impactful experience for them. I think that's wonderful. Now, Danielle, with Pinch Pals, it's a little bit different because your students found inspiration within their own group, and the community that they wanted to serve was not just local, but it was global. So what sort of community outreach did your team do to enhance their project?
Yeah, so similar to what Jason said, I'm not an expert. So great teacher, but I'm not an expert in endocrinology and material science and everything else that goes into it. So like you mentioned, Camilla was the inspiration that she has type 1 diabetes. So they also used a lot of her medical professionals as a starting point to make those connections and reach the greater diabetic community. She worked closely with her endocrinologist, who also gave her the name of, a family health facilitator and support groups that she could reach out to ask about their experiences or concerns around injections. Also material science, saying like, what plastics are you using? They talked to a dermatologist to see, what causes a reaction, because if you're giving an injection and trying to reduce pain and anxiety, you don't also want to have, an allergic reaction to the plastic that's being used. Also nurses, who are the ones, having that really close relationship, explaining how to use an injectable to a lot of their clients. So a lot of the work was done on the students, and that was also through the capstone project in general. After they, get their initial idea and problem statement, the capstone course requires and encourages them to reach out to mentors and professionals and find people that they are going to use as resources throughout. And because she had that connection, it was great. Again, like I don't know an endocrinologist off the top of my head. So it was great that she was able to pull from her experiences. And like I said, she did reach out to members in support groups or just other students that she knew or group members knew who had diabetes and asked about their experiences. So it wasn't, like you said, it was more of a larger community and less localized, but definitely still needed to engage, people who knew different areas of expertise, and, someone knew someone who knew someone who knew someone is kind of how that trickled out into the community.
Yeah, like making the connections and then realizing, oh, this is a place where we need additional support or additional research, or we need to talk to somebody else. And then the thinking about, we might be thinking about solving this problem for us. Like we want to go downtown and we don't have a, a way to walk. We have a friend who's type 1 diabetic and we want this experience. But then the solution that you're creating is so powerful because it's impacting a much larger community. And I think that experience for students is really important. That's something that they'll carry with them into their lives later, and thinking about how they solve problems and the impact that can have for others, and how to engage people in their community to solve these problems.
Absolutely.
So one of the things we often talk about is iteration. You think you've got a great solution and it doesn't really work. Grit and determination, the willingness to stick with it, the willingness to fail and learn from those failures in our Project Lead the Way classrooms. And I wonder about that with these Community Impact Award solutions, the problems that your students were solving with your team. I know when Danielle, for your students, when I was at their celebration for Pinch Pals, they talked about the design process challenges in their presentation. I wonder if you might talk a little bit about their experience and kind of this iterative nature, and that the first idea they have might not have been the one that ended up being the solution in the end.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that is embedded in all the Project Lead the Way classes. So fortunately, all 4 students that were in my group, I had had for at least 3 years in Project Lead the Way courses. So I was able to, help instill that grit and, determination along the way, which I think was really essential for them to succeed. Particularly what you had mentioned that they talked about was when they were printing the spikes. So their device is like a U shape that attaches on the end of a needle, and it has little spikes on it to help with desensitization. So when it's put on the arm, you feel the spikes instead of the needle. But they did a lot of designing on Fusion 360 and then also printing, and had to try out different materials, different filaments, different spacing of the little spikes on the end. They tried some that were square, some were rounded, some were hollow, some were empty, some printed well, and some didn't. So they had to learn from the design along the way. But instead of taking it as, oh, that didn't work, it was that didn't work because, and now what can we do? So really that determination to keep going, keep going. They also did a lot, and I know they shared this in the presentation, with the U-shaped design, because originally they wanted it to be small, and then after they didn't use a needle, but just just the plastic U-shaped on their friends, and tried different sizes, different angles, different measurements on it. And again, it was all taking it in with that consideration of which one is best, not is the first one the answer. So it really was, that continual process. But also say they did it with non-physical things too. Their problem statement is something that I think all groups in Capstone have to keep doing, that iterative process, partly because their project migrates over time, it changes a little bit from what they started to where they are in the end. But it's also that development and writing for a specific audience that goes through. So it's not just the physical components, but also the background and structural components that are adjusted as well.
That's a really good point, because, I think to your point around Project Lead the Way classroom, students are kind of used to this. The first thing that you do is not always the final solution, and you're gathering feedback and data, and you're learning from those kind of failures, and then revising your design. But the writing process is similar to that too, as you think about, audience and who you're communicating with and what do you need from them and what do you have to tell them, that is that same process as well. And I think that's a really important connection. Jason, I wonder if you might share a little bit about what it was like for your team and thinking about that kind of iterative nature, or the first solution not being the solution.
Wanted to reach out as well and get other opinions of districts that were, or communities that were much like Woodstock. So they looked around and they said, well, not only do we want a district or a, sorry, I keep saying district, but a city in Illinois to relate to, but also maybe one of the same size, or maybe one that has some of the touristic aspects that Woodstock has. So they kind of went with Evanston and Burlington, Vermont, which was kind of a little reach. But what they did is they found out when they called to talk with somebody on the city council, they weren't always available. So I said, try again. So we're going to have to keep calling and keep calling and keep calling. And I said, never give up. I said, and eventually, time did tell. And this also does play into the second part where we talk about the grit. When they were looking, the students actually went out and mapped the city. They mapped all of Woodstock. They laid out every area that didn't have a sidewalk and measured it, an approximate distance. They did that on Google Earth once they identified it. Then they identified every intersection that didn't have crosswalks. And, and then they kind of said, all right, this is great. This is what we have now. We have to dig deeper. So the students, once they put all these things together, they created their own maps, which are so interesting. But once they finished that, the more people we talked to, whether it was city people at the city or the contractors when they're talking to concrete contractors or painters, the city and painting the lines and everything, they found out there was always something else that they needed to figure out. And it was just kind of, okay, we're going to keep coming at it. So we looked at it one way. Now we got to keep adding more information and understand this is going to take a year. But, what was really interesting and inspiring was that after about the first couple weeks and quarter of the school year, they were into it. They were vested. They were just getting excited about it. The kids would just come and work on this stuff. And it was hard for me to pull them back and get some of the curricular work done. I'm like, you guys are just, I'm like, we gotta talk about this assignment, this component. So that was always the interesting part. And once they figured out the distance and the amount of feet, then they had to figure out the square footage of how much concrete had to be figured in, how long the lines had to be for the crosswalk, what different types of crosswalks there were. So again, learning more and more and more about it, the kids just kept building in. And then where did the failure, I guess, come in? The students at that point, we're about halfway through the school year. They're like, we got this. We're coming up with a solution after our meeting in December. And the final part was, hey, what else can we do? And they were kind of reaching a stalemate. They said, well, without some of the infrastructure here, we just really can't connect some of these things. And of course, the city has many, many things on their list on what we talk about, their comprehensive list. And many of those things are down the road. So I guess the kids kind of had that feeling of, we're not going to be able to finish this because we just can't connect those people on that side of the highway to here, or this neighborhood doesn't have access to certain amenities, or whatever the case is. So they kind of felt a little bummed about it. But after all of this had happened, progression was made in the city, and they had done a few things, and they've got a lot of other things on the docket that are showing that they're in this vested interest as well. And I can talk more about that now, or I can wait a little bit later. What would you prefer?
We'll come back to that. Is that okay with you?
Great.
But what I think that really highlights is a couple of things. One, students, you think that the solution, or you think we've solved the problem and that's it. And sometimes there are more layers to that problem. You think this is it. And okay, we figured out the sidewalk piece, but no, we've got to think about crosswalks and we have to think about this. And the other reality is you're working within constraints of whatever it is, the world that we live in, the community, the priorities and funding that your town has to do these things. And while you might think this is the greatest idea and absolutely everybody should be on board and we should do it, that being able to take a step back and saying, okay, these people on the Common Council not saying this isn't important, saying there are these other pieces. And so maybe we're doing this in phases. Maybe we're doing this part one. We have some other pieces we need to do before we can come back to it. And that I know it can feel deflating a little bit. And I'm sure your students were wrestling with that. But then also, how do we continue to bring these ideas back to the table so that the work can keep moving?
Yes.
So you all have amazing students who are in your groups. What are they all doing now? I know they're up to amazing things. What are they doing now? Danielle, what about your students?
Yeah, so mine all graduated last year. So they are wrapping up their first semester. All 4 of them are at college. Sophia is at the University of Connecticut doing pre-med. Darlin is also at UConn. She is studying to be a physician assistant. Penelope is at the University of Rhode Island doing pharmacology. And Camilla is at Northeastern doing biomechanical engineering. So they have all stuck in the STEM pathway so far. They're all doing well and super excited.
That's wonderful. Now, Jason, it's been a little bit more time because your team won almost 2 years ago. And so they've been out for a little bit. Do you know where they are now? What exciting things they're up to?
Yeah, sure. Liam Hansen, he's involved at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and he's in the mechanical engineering. Hunter Vassar is at Milwaukee School of Engineering, and he's doing computer engineering. And Peter Muschong, he's a superintendent of construction down in Chicago with Construction Inc. And Lucas, we weren't able to get any feedback on him, so I think he's still local at the current time.
These kids are doing amazing things, going to keep changing the world. And I love the experience that you were able to foster for them in their classrooms that is leading them into the amazing things that they're doing right now. You all may or may not know that the 25-26 Community Impact Award application window opened this month. And as you reflect back on your experience, what advice might you give to student teams and teachers who may be considering applying? Jason, any thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of, I always say go with the student ideas first, right? Because that's what the class is about, the students. But if they get a struggle and they're kind of like, what do we do? I always said, after this whole process had started, go to your city's or county's comprehensive plan. It's online. It's posted. It's usually 10 years projected, up to 20 years projected. And in some cases, it has to be updated every 5 years. So what is the pulse of the community. You know what they're working on, or at least what they have in mind. And this is where the students come into play. This is where they can offer their analysis ability, and where the capstone course fills right in and says, hey, instead of hiring somebody at this time, let's give you an idea of what it might cost. We're going to go through and contact all the engineers, all the contractors, and many other different facets. But we're going to give you an idea of what are you looking at here? What type of infrastructure might be a consideration? And that's one of the biggest things. So once you, and here's a bonus thing. If you want to align it with a competition, there's tons of competition. Project Lead the Way, Community Impact Competition, or there's plethora of different ones to choose from. Then contact and look at the comprehensive plan online. Identify your students' backgrounds. Like that'd be the third thing. Determine if it's a feasible or valid design. Can the students what can they accomplish in 1 year? I mean, some of the things I've ran into some past projects that we wish we had longer, and the kids could have done just even more outstanding things. So once you determine the viability of it all, take your students to the Common Council, meet them, introduce them, like I mentioned before, and talk to the Common Council members and kind of offer up what your students can provide to the city. It's a free, it's a free offering of what you and how the school and the community can work together. So that's the awesome part. And then, ask for a mentor. At that point, our Common Council was ecstatic about the whole thing. And they just said, we want to get involved. We want to get involved with the high school and the kids and help get them on the right track, or even give them some background or maybe job shadowing opportunities. So they were all about it. And then again, maybe even, and this is a nice part for my students, is they were written a letter of accommodation by the mayor. And it was signed by the Common Council members saying, hey, thank you for all your time and effort and everything you've been doing. We appreciate it. And that was the awesome part. And then the last part was presenting it to a professional group, just like a real engineer or a real professional would do. So again, those are the 8 steps. Hopefully, give it a shot. I think it'll turn out well.
Yeah, I think the making that connection to the local community, thinking about how you can, advocate for your common council or whatever professionals in this space to sort of recognize for students the value of what they're doing and giving students the opportunity to pitch their ideas, to show up in front of professionals and do that. I mean, that's what they'll be doing in the real world, and giving them this opportunity, I think, is fantastic. Danielle, I wonder if you will have any advice that you might share to teachers or students who are thinking about applying for this year.
Yeah, so mine is a little different because we didn't have that close connection with our city council. But I think it's really important for the students to find something that they're passionate about. I know I mentioned that earlier, but you're working on this for a year at least. I know my students want to continue working with it post-graduation as well. So it's at least a year that you're going to dedicate to something. So find something that you care about. I also think it's important to focus on the problem before you focus on the solution. If you come into this whole capstone, I know it doesn't have to be capstone, but if you come into the whole capstone experience saying, this is what I'm going to design, that's not the point. The point is, what is the problem? What's already there? And how can you make something better? So I think really focusing on that aspect of it. For the students, I would absolutely say, don't let your current skills limit what you think you can do. And I know Jason spoke on this somewhat as far as like being, intimidated by speaking to all these professionals, and am I going to be in person, and like, do I need to dress up? What am I doing? But I think even focusing on like, I don't know how to write a full report. Some of them might not. Use the resources that you have. Our capstone students, we have a mix of computer science, engineering, and biomed together in 2 sections. This year we have more students this year, which is exciting. But some groups, haven't used Fusion 360 since freshman year and are like, oh, well, that means I can't design something. It doesn't. It means you might need to talk to another group, or you might need to find another mentor. So I really want the students to not limit what they think they can do based on what they can currently do. And for the teachers, I feel like one of the biggest things is let go. This is a student project. Like, we are here to facilitate, we are here to guide, we are here to support, but the students have fantastic ideas. And like, all the projects that my students have done so far, I never would have thought of them. Like, never would have thought that this was something also that could be done in that time frame as well. And I know mine is also a little bit different, that our students had a prototype, like a polished prototype by the end of the year. They didn't necessarily have a completed product ready to go to market, ready for everything else, but they still made a significant impact in that short amount of time and have the potential. So I think that that's important too when we look at the time frame of what's going on in these schools, is it might not necessarily be completed and come to fruition, but having that background, the research, the prototyping, the design, the presentation process, that's all really essential as well.
I think the point about the student ideas is so valuable. Students have great ideas and they really feel connected to problems they're trying to solve. And I think that point about teachers encouraging that, and that think about a problem you want to solve and not just what the solution, I think, is really valid. And the other thing that both of you are mentioning that I think really is at the heart of Community Impact Award as well is, one part of it when we think about community is the impact that students are making a difference. They're solving a problem that will make a difference in their community. They're also leveraging community, whether it's mentors, talking to professionals, making connections, presenting back, like they're engaging with the community. And some of that's for their learning to solve the problem, and some of that's to share the ideas. And I think that's the other anchor to this, is how teachers can help students leverage those members of their community to help them solve their problems. And I think that's something that both of you really spoke to. Now, what's interesting about community impact is, particularly at the high school level, for a lot of students, they're engaging in this mostly their senior years. Not that students can't be making a difference at any other time, but we have a lot of students who are doing it through their capstone and their seniors. And then they solve these great problems, they start these solutions, and they might go off and do other things. And so a wonder is, what does that look like? Are some of these projects still evolving? If not, what is something that we could be thinking about, how we kind of maintain these projects? So I know, Jason, some movement's been made around the walkability project in Woodstock, and I wonder if you might talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So right as the students were presenting at their final meeting in May with the Common Council, uh, the mayor, after listening, said, this colorful crosswalk is an important thing. And because we have a lot of student parking lots that are on the adjacent to schools, the high schools as well as some of the elementary schools, he said, that's going to be done. And he just said, that's it. That's going to be our first step. And coincidentally, that happened in May. And by September, the crosswalk was completed. And it was a colorful crosswalk with the school colors and the school emblem logo going across it for the blue streaks. So that was really exciting for then the kids to see. Even though they were graduated, they drive over it every day, and other kids were like, wow, how'd that come about? So it brought a lot of conversation amongst the students. But also the city said, we hear you as a students and all the great information you brought us. And they said, we need to start looking at this. So what they did in 2024, which was a year after, is they created an Access Woodstock plan. And they said, we want to hear more from the community. We want to get everybody's ideas in here. So they had a big meeting, and here's a little bit of a background. That meeting, some of the maps that I mentioned earlier that the students created were used in reference when talking with the community. And there was a national urban planning group called Design. I forgot, I didn't write it down. Design is a design marketing plan. It's their national group, but they are based out of Chicago. They were on part with that whole Access Woodstock, and they asked the kids if we can use your plan. They gave them credit for it, which was so awesome because they said, all the work your students have done is just, we couldn't even have fathomed getting it done in the amount of time. And then the Common Council said, all right, that's awesome. How else can we meet some of this little bit of disconnect? And they looked at it actually, let me get the name correctly here, a big metals plant that had closed down in town. And they said, what if we were to develop on that property? And with that, we would come up with some housing. So some like an urban complex with shopping and other things right nearby. So that's on the plan. And that's actually starting to be talked about here for 2006 is when they're going to start getting more involved with that. So it took off, which was great, and I guess bringing sometimes that awareness from the community. It shows the kids, if you really, are hoping for change, you got to say something, you got to speak out and, don't just yell, bring facts, bring information, bring knowledge,
Yes,
bring details.
and you can't just identify a problem without coming with ideas for solutions. Well, I can't wait to come back to Woodstock and check out the colorful crosswalks that are now there. And I think it highlights the point that the goal of these community-centered projects is that they come to fruition. The hope is that these ideas will come alive. And I think, Jason, what you're able to highlight is an example where that happened. What are some suggestions you might have about how to do that? So Danielle, I'm thinking about for you, what suggestions do you have for those who are thinking about this in the future about how students are empowered to take ideas from, or take their concepts from idea to reality?
Yeah, so I think part of it is reaching out to those professionals that they've already established relationships with along the way, especially the ones who are in the field, because they know what needs to happen next to have this idea, this concept, this product come to fruition. Like I've never filed a patent. I don't know the process. I can research a patent because that's part of what we have our students do. But some of these professionals that they've already made contact with understand the next step and where to go from here and who else needs input before moving forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you all are highlighting that is so important about this is the engagement with the community and the engagement with professionals. They are the ones like, you think about when you have professionals and community members who also are cheerleading these efforts and getting excited about these and can help students think about the next step and to take it forward. And so I think it's really worth noting the importance of that aspect that we talked about earlier. It's not just the community you're trying to make an impact on, it's the community that you're involving and becoming champions for these solutions and solving these problems. I am just so happy to have reconnected with both of you. I had the chance to be out there in both of your communities and meet your students, and just really was so impressed with them and the work that they did and their commitment to solving problems that make an impact. And so I just really want to thank you for the work that you do and for being here with us today. And just a reminder for those who are listening or watching on YouTube, the application window for the 25-26 Community Impact Award is open, and I hope that maybe Jason and Danielle have inspired you and your students to share your work and apply for this year's award. You can learn more about all of this by checking out the resources and links in the show notes. Don't forget that the Community Impact Awards are open to both high school and middle school students. Thank you for joining us for the first episode of Season 2 of Inspired, a PLTW podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join the PLTW community.